All right. Welcome back to the Barbell Lifestyle Podcast. I'm super pumped today, bringing on another guest, but one of the very first guests that we've had on the show in a really long time. So, we're really honored for this. And it's a good friend of mine who I met at a fitness event, but he's also an in person, an online trainer, and also a writer for a lot of fitness and health magazines and articles. So I'm really excited to introduce you and to learn today from Andrew Coates. So welcome.
So it's so nice to see you again and for you guys to have me. Christina, nice to meet you. And everybody listening, thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Cool. Well, today's really just about picking your brain. And I think to start, obviously letting the audience get to know you and a little bit of your backstory, just to know kind of what lens you're coming from with the knowledge that you have and the experience that you have. But then today, what I really want to do is just kind of get into what all of your time and experience in the industry has been able to teach you for the people that listen to us, and lessons that we can learn and skip the mistakes that maybe you've made along the way. So let's start with your background. Just how start with this. Like, what was the entry point for fitness for you?
Okay, there are two major inflection points. So actually, I suppose three. I was very lucky growing up in rural Newfoundland, small town, that my parents were very forward thinking when it came to fitness and nutrition. We were lucky enough to grow up with a lot of home, cooked meals, a lot of nutritious stuff. And for context, I'm 46. So we're talking about like, I was born in 1978 to give people an idea. Okay. So growing up kid in the 80s, 90s, etc. Despite the fact it was a rural, remote community, we got involved in a lot of sports. My mom was a teacher at the local school, which is like K through 12. So we didn't have a high school basketball coach, but my mom would stay around late and let me and my brother play basketball with the team. We were sort of self-coached. We got to play a lot of high school basketball. My parents got us involved in cross-country skiing young. They tried with swimming. They're both amazing swimmers. I never took to water. So they provided access to a lot of fitness-based stuff. So I think that's obviously really important, is you just exposing kids to a lot of different avenues to explore fitness. The second point would have been in university. I would dabble in the gym. I had an old university girlfriend. We would go sometimes. It never stuck with us. I used to walk around campus a lot, but it was also like, the university party lifestyle. But after university, kind of got away from like the all of that routine, fell into a bit of a funk, and then said, screw this, I'm getting serious about the gym. So I got very committed to working out, lifting weights in a gym 4 or 5 times a week, eating better. And I put on a lot of muscle in a fairly short amount of time. And that just sort of changed my life, changed my confidence. So that really took hold, became part of who I was. And I ended up, I've had an interesting like life in my 20s. I used to own a nightclub for a period of time. I've worked in banks. I've worked in all sorts of different things. I have a Bachelor of Commerce degree. I didn't come through with a degree in a related field of nutrition or exercise science. And I moved across country, changed a life, got back in the gym again. And I'd worked also in the casino world, the poker world for a while. So life experience, kind of valuable when it comes to coaching and understanding different people you work with.
Yeah.
So at the age of 32, the staff at the gym I worked out at kept bugging me to come work there, and I kept saying no. And by this point, I'd, quit the casino, toxic work environment, not great, not a lot of future there. And so I needed a job. So instead of being this passionate 19, 20-year-old who enters fitness, to try to change the world, I fell into a job. And that doesn't sound very sexy, but what ended up happening was I got busy fast. I realized I liked it. I realized I was very good at it. I generated floor walk-up sales, referral business very quickly. And I quickly became very ravenous for learning about exercise science, nutrition as much as I could. I would read websites like Teen Nation, bodybuilding.com very early in my career. I started discovering and finding fitness podcasts and a lot of the fitness authorities. So I'm listening to them, reading their stuff. Got onto like Lane Norton's early YouTube video log stuff, which is really good nutrition stuff. Started reading more books about exercise science, nutrition, and then really went down the podcast rabbit hole with a lot of the classic podcasts like Danny Ledden's Sigma Nutrition Radio, a lot of good nutrition on that one. And it just kept mushrooming and mushrooming in terms of knowledge base and passion for it. Meanwhile, I just put my head down and just got really busy and gained an enormous amount of training experience over the course of the 6 years I was at this commercial gym. And then that environment always had its issues. So I eventually had enough. I left. I went out on my own company, working under the gym umbrella of a friend of mine's company. It's called Evolve Strength. And John is now my partner in a fitness conference that we do each of the last 2 years. We had it in 2019 as well. And along that way, I started stepping out. A friend of mine wanted to start a podcast in 2017. That grew. I'm still doing that. I started writing for my own website that my friend built for me. And then as I started traveling to fitness conferences, I met a lot of people through the industry, connected with some of the people who I've been learning from for years. People took notice of the writing. Next thing you know, I've got an invitation to write for T Nation over 5 years ago, which of course really mushroom clouded a lot of the brand stuff because that's a big deal. And then that led to more and more until now I've written for a lot of the stuff that I grew up reading in the industry, which is sort of surreal.
Yeah.
Along the way, the podcast continued. I traveled to more and more events, and I started, as I leaned into social media grew over the last 4.5 years. I started getting the public speaking opportunities that have been very kind of wild, right? Like you and I met at last year's coaching con. And then this year's coaching con, Jason Phillips invited me to come back and speak. So me and Luca Hosevar, who's become a good friend, are literally speaking up on this stage. It's like, well, how the hell did this sort of thing happen, right? Anyway, there's been a lot of like that brand and career side that way, but I still am a full-time in-person trainer, full-time online. I have a women's group strength training program, and it's still about the people in front of me. All the other things are just bonus trappings that I get to do because they're fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. I did not know your background with all the sports and how you fell into the job. That's really cool. So how many years in the industry does that make for you now?
13 and a half.
Nice. Cool. Okay. Well, then I would be curious to know your take on this because this is kind of the direction that I was planning on taking it. We'll see if we go down this rabbit hole for a while or if we pivot. But you've written a lot, and that was something that we talked about writing, speaking when we originally met, and I was just trying to pick your brain about a lot of that stuff. But I think when it comes to writing, whether it be for an Instagram tweet or a article, you have to take something that could be really, really complex and make it really, really simple. I think that's something that not a lot of people try to do, but not a lot of people do well in this industry. And I think that's why you have been able to get the opportunities that you've gotten is by distilling that information very, very well. So how do you kind of pick and choose like what you choose to focus on when you're writing, when you're communicating information to audiences?
Really important thing within all this. It's paying attention to the conversations, the questions, the things that are going on with your clients. And coaches are both great and terrible at this. You'll have these amazing conversations. You'll have these amazing questions. A lot of times there'll be recurring questions and themes come up with your clients. And coaches will dive in and they'll answer them, right? Or they'll go, hey, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to go research that. I'm going to learn about it. But what they don't do very well is actually write down the fact, wait a second, there's an idea here. And so imagine you're the coach who has a lot of these questions reoccur over the course of the years of our career, and you answer them each time to the person in front of you, which you're supposed to do. But what if you took some of those ideas and went, wait a second, I keep getting this. Why don't I do a 15-minute YouTube video about this? Why don't I do a podcast about this? Why don't I write an article about this? Why don't I build a written, frequently asked questions section for my website? Why don't I take this and why don't I share the concept on social media in short form and build a library of these resources? And that's what a lot of people don't do, or they don't think to capture the idea in the moment. But I've been in the habit of doing this. If I'm literally in the shower, which is the only place we don't take our phones anymore, which is why you get so many great ideas in there. If you're out
Yeah.
for a walk and you're not fucking with your phone, stuff pops in your mind. So, of course, I'll get an idea about like a training article or a social media post. And I'm like just remembering in the shower. And all of a sudden I hop out, like don't even dry myself off, go to the notes section and write down the thing. So that way I don't forget this, because otherwise you will forget.
Yep.
I've been in bed. There was a night where my mind was going about a presentation concept that I had. And I remember for probably about an hour, I kept planning out the structure of the presentation in my mind. And then I pop up, write the note in my phone. And actually, like this really good presentation I do as a keynote, a big point of the structure and the continuum of that presentation was, it's sort of like a rough night's sleep for an hour, but it gave me everything I needed to build around. So it's just recognize and capture these things, make notes of them, and you can come back later on and do the structure thing. And these tweet-based posts are kind of ingenious and sneaky because Twitter's changed a little bit now, but traditionally there was a character limit. And so you're forced to write out a self-contained thought. I mean, you can do multiple slides, which is also like a carousel. That's really smart. But it's, can I condense this concept, this idea that I want to make resonant, so that way it helps people, gives them information, inspires them, motivates them. I don't like too fluffy, but sometimes you have to give surface level thoughts that will resonate with people on social media to lead them to deeper long form stuff that you can go in much greater depth, like an article, like a podcast. So the character limit actually forces you to carefully choose every word, right? And you distill down the meaning. You get rid of the extraneous fluffy stuff, the weak adverbs that pop up. Now we're getting the technical writing stuff. And if you want to learn about writing, like over my shoulder here, these books right here, all books on writing. So I actually study writing. It's just one of the things I like doing, is like having at least a book on writing sort of going in the background at a given time. It's not like my only focus, but I'm picking away at it to learn important concepts like editing. There's so much embedded in there. I'm not going to get technical. If someone listening has questions and is interested, message me. I'll give you resources. Okay, easy. But short form is actually not a bad place to practice word selection, editing, because you have that constraint of a character limit. And that's worked really well for highly resonant, highly shareable, highly engaging social media based posts in a graphic format that was really popular for a long time. Video now is probably more ubiquitous, but I mean, good writing in the ability to take maybe, like I said, complex concepts, distill them down, or really resonant things, that's still a skill. So what you're really trying to do if someone's interested in like social media side of stuff, you're trying to create social currency. Think about social media as social currency. Think about the friend of yours that sends you cat videos or the politically incorrect shit that people laugh at, but if it was like posted publicly, you'd all get canceled, right? We all know we got friends who do that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, and the stuff that's funny, okay? So everybody listening is like, oh yeah, I got that friend. And if you think about like two of my best friends, they're amazing. And one of them like does not express how she feels about things or people at all. She speaks through memes. So that's her way of showing, affection. The other one can kind of go the other way. She'll send memes, but she also like will verbal diarrhea of like long paragraphs about how she feels about people. But they both send lots of cat memes and a lot of other stuff. And it's their way of expressing how they feel about stuff. But what they do is they've found some piece of social currency, because when they find that someone's posted it, they send it and they go, hey, this made me think of you. I was thinking of you. Okay. I think this would be valuable to you. So if you get really good at creating these sort of things, or if the people listening, like just like following this stuff, and you find the accounts that like consistently create stuff, you're like, this is great. Yeah, this is what I think. I wish I'd written that. And then you share it with your friends. That's actually how you can actually be good with social media stuff. So, and I wanted to also frame it from the lens of the consumer who just shares it. This is why you guys do this sort of stuff. So I just practice trying to write and create things that, you do more of it over time, you get a better sense of what people will engage with and share with. And that's also valuable. And you just gain this skill. And then you just reuse the stuff that's really good because it's proven.
That's one of the tweets that you've been really well known for is the one, I'm going to butcher this, but, exposing kids to weight training at a young age, something like that, right?
Well, yeah, it's the idea there is expose them to gym environments, right? And it's not about indoctrinating them and forcing them into doing anything. It's about putting them in the environment and letting them see this as a young kid, to see mom and or dad are doing this as part of their life. So we have a healthy, active lifestyle. And the gym can be a metaphor for anything active. It's a sport you like, outdoors, hiking, you name it, all that sort of stuff, all counts. Swimming, blah, blah, blah. Right? And if kids grow up in those kind of environments and see this stuff as normal, well, it's more likely to take a foothold as something that keeps them active, metabolically active, good for their mental health that they grow up into, as opposed to, and how many listeners have had this experience? You may have found fitness in your 30s or 40s or older. You never grew up around gyms. And the first time you stepped foot in a gym environment, it was really intimidating, really scary because it was unfamiliar to you. And maybe you stepped in that environment 30, 40 or more pounds overweight. And you wanted to start because you didn't know where to start. You did not feel good energy. You maybe your doctor, there's something came back, you're metabolically unhealthy in some way, shape, or form. That's obviously a powerful motivator. And you're starting out from a place of maybe fear and intimidation, but you were lucky enough that your why was powerful, that you stuck with it. Maybe you found a great coach or had a friend in that environment, or the gym was just a really welcoming environment once you got over that initial kind of apprehension of it and you stuck with it. But think about how many people fail in that task. So you can give a gift forward to your kids in giving them the option. And maybe it doesn't stick with them early, but maybe they find it later on when they need it. And it's a positive piece of their growing up, and they remember, yeah, mom and dad used to do this stuff, right? And so that's the whole philosophy behind that post. And that the post you reference is probably one of the most viral ones that I've ever, and I reshare it from time to time. It always does crazy well. But I believe in it. I think it's amazing.
Exactly. But it's the fact that everything you just said, which could be like many, many paragraphs, came across in that little snippet of information. At least I understood it that way. And I'm sure the reason why it went viral is because there's so much implied in what you said, but you chose the right words to communicate that message specifically.
Comes with practice.
Yeah. And so I
Comes
think
with it.
that's what's beautiful about it. But maybe now that, we're talking about it, maybe the listeners like, I have seen that tweet go around, like, right.
It's been frequently plagiarized, or I catch people all the time are rewriting their own version of it. And I mean, that's the nature of the stuff you can't get too twisted about. But if I catch a bigger account just blatantly ripping it off, I'll send them a message, don't be charitable. And sometimes I've outed some pretty bad plagiarists before on my social media. I can't do it all the time because you just get consumed with it. But I've outed a few people, and some people don't handle it very well. They block you. Then they have to go private because your followers don't like when they do that sort of shit very much. Your followers are amazing. People are great. But then I've had people who've apologized, owned it, and just admitted that they fucked up.
Yeah.
And usually they're smart enough to take the posts down. They kind of go away. But my stuff gets plagiarized all the time. And again, you can't burn a lot of emotional energy and get pissed off about the stuff too much.
No, because I mean, it's ultimately they're trying to emulate you. And so they're not doing it the right way, but they are in a way, trying to giving you that credit of like, hey, this was so good that I didn't even bother to write my own words. But yeah, so it's good that, you have that perspective on it.
It also
But
speaks to people's integrity, and you can tell pretty quickly. There's a woman. Actually, I gotta shout her out because her stuff's great. So hold on, I just gotta remember her handle. I was just chatting with her earlier. So she goes by This Woman Lifts. Her name's Elizabeth, and I had found an account that had rewritten one of her popular posts. She's got this post. Was it Training for My Summer Body? This one's great, and I think a lot of women have seen this one. I just got to bring this up again. I apologize to see if I can remember what it is. Yeah, she doesn't have it pinned at the top, but it's something to the effect, I'm training for my summer body. Fuck no, I'm training for my old lady body. And it just goes on to about strong bones and this sort of stuff. So every once in a while, I'll see something on the Explore page. I saw a rewritten version of this post, right? Same concept, just rewritten. So I look closely, sure enough, there's a rewritten version of one of my posts, the Kids in Gym one. So I sent this girl a message, I commented on it, and she's just ignoring me. She knows what she's doing. So this is someone who basically just takes people's stuff and rewrites it. So I'm going to take another swing around and just nudge her again. And then I'm going to block her if she doesn't respond, because I don't want her to have access to my stuff anymore. But I find so with Elizabeth's post, I actually shared her original with her name on it, tagged her at the top, and she's appreciative. What ended up happening is the post went mega viral again, but it drove a ton of followers to her. So it's about abundance mindset and supporting other people versus being stupid and selfish. And it just shows you people's integrity. And if you're out there consuming fitness media, who do you want to learn from? Do you want to learn from people who support other people, are generous, are abundant, who just generally have good attitudes and mindsets about stuff? I'll give you another example. Like every once in a while, some just greasy shitbag will pop up in the fitness industry who's got a really bad reputation for a variety of different things. There's a guy, I'm hesitant to name him, so I probably won't, but he's basically resurfaced again. A couple of years ago, he was called out by a lot of different fitness professionals, a lot of the TikTok fitness community. They're kind of a different animal. But this guy was sending inappropriate messages to underage women, underage girls. He had a very, very bad track record of, like, a lot of women were coming forward about behavior. He'd even said some really gross shit on like public podcasts, and just overall, just seemed to be a very, very big pattern of just gross behavior. So anyway, publicly called out. He seemed to have kind of vanished for a while. A couple years later, he pops up again, and now he's grifting as somehow a women's menopause coach. But on top of that, he's saying a lot of things that are not evidence-based, right? And what we have now is we have this space that there hasn't traditionally been a great amount of research, but all of a sudden, the fitness industry is realizing, wait a second, there are a ton of women who are perimenopausal, menopausal, who are frustrated, who are undergoing changes to their bodies that, as a guy, I cannot possibly understand. And they've realized that, okay, there are a ton of female fitness consumers, because women are better fitness consumers than men are. They just are. It's a thing on average.
Yeah.
And they're hungry to learn, and they're hungry for solutions. And what we had for years, we've had, like, I hate it when anybody demonizes the fitness industry, because I think it's full of really caring, wonderful people, like great coaches. But we also have big marketing entities and grifters and false promises of, hey, lose 30 pounds in 6 weeks without dieting, blah, 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 drink this shake. That stuff's been out there. We've got, you've got my pal Goob calling out people who Photoshop their photos, right? That's not a new thing. Cosmo and Glamour and all these other magazines have been airbrushing out cellulite and all these other sort of things, and altering body segment lengths and distorting women's body image for decades, right? So that's not a new thing. It's always been around. I think people are getting wiser to this shit, but there will always be grifters and bad faith actors. And especially when they realize you've got confused people, frustrated people, people who are looking for easy solutions to complex problems, who are frustrated because they want to lose weight. A lot of it's based in that. And now all of a sudden we've got a whole bunch of people entering the menopause space. Now you have good, credible people like Molly Galbraith and Girls Gone Strong. There are other great people in that space. And Molly actually gifted me her course. I'm looking for the textbook. I have it downstairs. And she has a collective of doctors, PhDs, and other just really brilliant women who know exercise science, nutrition, and women's hormonal health, and so much more, endocrinologists. So they're a great resource. And there are people learning from Molly on that team. But then there are people who are going out and just making very wild claims, like this particular guy is. And now we're seeing a lot of talk about cortisol. If you hear someone talking about cortisol, 9 times out of 10, they probably don't know what the fuck they're talking about. We're seeing people talk about all kinds. What are some of the other buzzworthy things right now that women have been being sold and marketed to last couple of years?
I've heard
hormone balancing is one of the goofy ones.
Hormone balancing. I've heard
gut health.
Gut health. Totally, gut health. If you talk to, so one of the smartest, most educated people in gut health is Dr. Gabrielle Fundaro. Gabrielle's great.
We've had her on twice.
What's that?
We've had her on twice.
There you go, right? So credible authority on that.
Yeah.
And Gabrielle will be one of the first people to tell you that, like, we don't actually necessarily know a whole lot about what's really going on. So you get people coming on who are not credentialed or not well educated, making really, really bold, strong claims about how to deal with gut health, or how to deal with menopause, or how to deal with cortisol. And I just tell people, just approach this stuff with caution. And if it's an overly simple answer to a complex problem, promises of easy results, I would just approach it with skepticism. I would just approach with caution. And I mean, these are the things now, because weight loss has always been the thing. Now we have all these other, related, semi-related things. And or another buzzword is inflammation. I haven't heard that one as much lately, but for a while it's been like everything's inflammation. Guess what? There's truth in all of these things. There is truth in, if you have chronically elevated cortisol. Okay, but it's not so much that cortisol is the cause of all the problems. Like when we work out, we acutely raise cortisol levels, right? Cortisol in chronically elevated states, it's a stress hormone. It means that we're living in a chronically stressed state. So we have to address that. Okay. And yes, you will preferentially store body fat if you have chronically elevated cortisol, assuming you're also in a calorie surplus all the time. Okay. That's relevant. But cortisol in of itself is not this demonic, universally bad thing. If you have no cortisol, and I should know this, but there's a bunch of disorders, and I always sometimes get them mixed up. Maybe one of you guys, I can't remember if it's Graves or Cushing's or Hashimoto's, because I always get them mixed up. I apologize.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and I had a client who had to go get tested for that, and I can't remember the name. It starts with an A.
I'm going to look it up because this is relevant, because there's a bunch of different things, but there's one where there's like too much, and there's low cortisol disease. Cushing's. No. Cushing's is high. Let's see. Adrenal insufficiency occurs when adrenal glands don't make enough of the hormone. Addison's. Thank you. So Cushing's is one way, Addison's is the other. All right. I hope people realize why this gets confusing, right? Even we don't always have these things memorized. So Addison's is bad, okay? We don't want no cortisol, okay? Because cortisol is actually really important. It's an important hormone for fat mobilization. But we just don't want it elevated. So what do? We go back into like, all right, what's going on with the chronically stressed situation? We're underslept. Very, very common, especially with perimenopausal women. That's a big thing. And I'm not an expert in this stuff. I'm learning as I'm going. If nutrition is out of whack, if we're not exercising consistently, and if we are in a highly stressed environment, and stress, the science of stress is kind of cool. There's a really good book, The Upside of Stress by Kelly McGonigal.
And I love her stuff. Yeah.
Great stuff. And notice I'm like trying to throw out like a lot of like great women who have like are experts in this realm. Like it's not an accident, because there are like a lot of these really good resources and people. So go check out some of these books I've talked about and some of the people. So if you're in a what we would call a traditionally high stress job, but you actually have a strong sense of control over your own outcome, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's when you're in a very stressed state, but you have a low sense of control over the situation. That's probably one of the most detrimental situations, which a lot of people can find themselves in for a variety of reasons. It's also why I have a particularly nasty pet peeve with people who operate in our fitness industry who perpetuate narratives about all the reasons why things are beyond your control. This is a grift, and it's a piss off for me. And there are people, and I'm going to drift into something here. I want to be careful. I find that usually we get people who are ideologically driven in terms of socio-political ideology, who have entered the fitness industry space, or they're fitness professionals who are just everything runs through the filter of social ideology. Okay. And guess what? Most of us are kind of sick of everything being political, social, ideological. And there will always be people screaming, you have to care about this stuff. No, nobody is under the obligation to negatively impact your own emotional well-being by drowning in the outrage of every horrible fucking thing that's going on in the world, because social media and 24-hour news cycle are drowning you in these situations. And it doesn't mean that they're not legitimate, they're not bad. But up until our generation, there was no access to real-time information about every ill and evil going on in the world. And it's hard enough dealing with your own life and all the stresses without being pressured by people that you have to be outraged about every other thing going on in the world. Does that make sense?
Oh,
And there
totally.
could probably be some people here who are listening who are going to be offended by that. And I apologize, but I want you to think about this in terms of, if you're one of these people who pushes these complex things in front of everybody on your social media in your real world, are you really doing anything good for them and their emotional well-being? What about the mother of 3 children who also happens to be, maybe domestic life, family life isn't necessarily that great. There's plenty of that going around. Maybe job is really stressful. Maybe there's a sick parent you're also trying to caretake for, or take some combination of these things. And all of a sudden, you're the presence that's making her feel like she has to get emotionally involved in a foreign conflict, as horrific as those things are. No, like, pardon my words, fuck right off. Leave that person alone. She's dealing with, or he's dealing with, their own crap. And so back to my original point is, we have people within our industry who I think they're wired to push a lot of this stuff. And overwhelmingly, I find they also tend to perpetuate narratives about, sometimes it's genetics, sometimes it's demographics, but all of the reasons why it's beyond your control. The odds are against you. And it's meant as a well-intentioned soft landing for when people fail. And that's the important thing to recognize. They're preparing you to fail, and they're giving you a lot of reasons why you can't do the thing. Now, guess what? You can be told the odds. You can be told all of the reasons why our modern world of excess and abundant calories that are engineered in combinations of fat, sugar, salt that were never found in nature. So they're a super normal stimulus. It's a good thing to recognize. Or how social media and how it hijacks our dopamine, again, super normal stimuli, and we get so much more of it. Right? The environment is sort of stacked against us. It's not as malicious as some people think it is. It just happens to be a byproduct of the fact that people want easy, they want simple, they want to be entertained, and companies, for-profit companies, are going to make things that are going to be sell. And how do you sell food? Stuff, make it tasty, right? How do you make it tasty? Put a lot of calories in it in combinations, right? Yeah. I love Dairy Queen Reese Peanut Butter Cup Blizzards, but I have a boundary around that. That's the thing I look forward to. So therefore, I don't eat a lot of other mediocre crap. We can come back to that, but I don't want to get off, because I go in all sorts. I'm side questing all over the place here. So what I push back against is narratives that tell people, oh, it's beyond your control, so don't bother. And I think there's a lot of people that come into health and wellness journeys who are coming from a place of poor metabolic health, poor emotional health. But I really think there's a subsection of that, and I think this shows up in New Year's resolutions as well, where for sure they would like to see the outcome, but they almost want to be told and be put in a situation where they try, but they fail. Because if the odds are stacked against them and they craft a situation, an environment that sets them up for failure, then they can turn around and they're alleviated of the emotional discomfort and say, well, this is beyond my control. There's nothing I can do.
Yeah.
And that alleviates that emotional discomfort of having actually ownership, control, or responsibility over an outcome. And I push back against that stuff. And I want people to actually gain a sense that while it's going to be challenging, we look around all the time, we see people who are successful in this. So don't become a statistic. Don't buy into narratives that will give you every justification why you can't do the thing. And the New Year's concept that I mentioned, what do a lot of people do? They say, all right, I'm never going to eat sugar again. Oh, that's going to work out so well. They say that I'm going to go on this really strict diet and I'm going to work out 5-6 times a week. And this is on average someone who doesn't even know how to work out. Okay. So start going to the gym. They're confused. They're a bit lost. They didn't grow up around gym environments. Circling back. And then they do this white knuckle, draconian, restrictive dieting. And they're probably not equipped with the know-how to do all this sort of stuff. And they do this for a little while. And then it's overwhelming. And the first stressful day at work or something happens. And then they fall off the rails. But I actually think subconsciously a lot of people set themselves up with a plan that they know deep down will fail because they've tried. And the guilt, the shame, whatever is alleviated temporarily because they tried and they went, see, I just proved to myself I'm not the sort of person who can do this. There's a fixed identity that I am not a person who's active. I'm not a blah, blah, blah. And they go back to the way things were until the emotional discomfort creeps back up again. Physically, they don't feel well to the point where they make another attempt at it. And what I want to do with, our industry as a whole and individually is I want to create a safe environment for those people to learn about effective tactics for nutrition, effective ways to get into working out, and to have an experience that they actually feel really good about to the point where they feel results and they go, I feel different. My mental health is better. My mood is better. My metabolic health. Anybody who's ever gone like started doing more cardio, started working out, and like, yeah, you feel more confident, your mood's different, you see your body changing, but like it's almost like you can feel that your heart feels better, your lungs, your energy, like your cardiovascular health, you can feel improvements in that.
Yeah.
And when you feel all these things, what I hope happens is people say, I'll never go back. I would never, ever want to go back. I want to get more people to feel what this feels like, so they're on our team now. And I'm just not on board with our own industry like slashing people's tires and saying, no, it's not your fault. It's okay. It's not about fault, but it's about responsibility. And we've got too many people who are building, and this is the thing, and everybody listening, recognize this. There are people, what they do, I'm going to say something kind of mean here.
Do it.
Our industry is full of great people, but it also attracts a lot of useless human beings, a lot of status hungry, useless people. And I mentioned ideology, and again, like someone might think that I'm biased one way or the other. No, I'm actually quite neutral on this stuff, because I think that when it comes to, I don't like getting political because I hate this stuff. I won't spend any time consuming this crap. But I think on both sides of the aisle, there are a lot of useless human beings who gravitate to these spaces because it's a way for them to easily build status by grifting on complicated topics and spouting off the opinions of their political tribe. And then they tend to police the purity of the other people who are part of the tribe. There's a book called The Status Game by Will Storr. It's actually a really good exploration of this. But status building, I mean, humans are wired to seek and perceive status. It's a tribal, it's a thing that helped humans survive in ancient times. We're pattern recognition machines. This is a really important thing to understand about people. And one of the patterns we recognize is status in society and where we are in different environments. Someone can be very high status in one thing and low status in another. You get the CEO of a company who happens to be like the fourth stringer on a hockey team, right? Versus the captain. And the captain of the hockey team might be, an entry-level employee in something, but those two people have different status in those two different environments. And so we tend to understand our status within the tribe. But what would keep us from getting kicked out of the tribe and, keep us from getting, basically not surviving, or I guess it was pretty instrumental in like being able to find a mating partner in our ancestral environment, is probably more maladaptive in our modern society. And we now have these vehicles like social media and various other things that gives people easier access to rapidly accumulating status. But then you have people who aren't necessarily experienced or educated. Well, they will enter spaces like socio-political talking heads or the fitness industry, as it happens. And then they just get very savvy with social media. And they figured out that, well, I can actually say a whole bunch of rubbish to people that's going to get them mad or make them feel better about themselves, and gain status and gain following, while actually not contributing in a positive way and generating a lot of outrage. And if we recognize these spaces through this lens, it can inoculate us against being hijacked out of our own emotional well-being or positive state of wellness. Because I think it's a really good idea to notice just how much of the content you're consuming in various forms, different media, leaves you outraged. I mean, I can think of someone in my world who spends all their time sitting in front of CNN and just literally almost in a constant state of outrage over a particular, politician. I'm Canadian, right? So I try not to get into American politics. But, okay, I get it. Like, I understand. But at the same time, how good is that for your mental health and like the use of your time just to literally sit there on the 24-hour news site? Now, again, I drift into an interesting place, but I think we can kind of do the same thing with fitness, and we end up with tribal ideology in fitness, whether it's the nutritional tribal ideology is really wild. You get people who have their favorite diet in their Instagram bio or in their name on their bio. It's like, shit me. You get the carnivore people or the vegans or the keto people.
The hormone coaches.
And it's really the same sort of thing now, because there's tribal ideology, there's tribes forming around these concepts. And so it goes back to what I was talking about with the people who are talking about things like menopause and cortisol. Again, in a lot of cases, these are fairly useless people who are trying to build status within the tribe, and then they're trying to cash in. And I have no issue with great fitness professionals earning a great living by helping people. I actually think it's a great career to be in, and I want to help more coaches stay in this space. But I do not believe in taking shortcuts and going really hard on the misinformation. I mean, we look at the Liver King. The Liver King is a great example of this, right?
Yeah.
Built a very large following on a very extreme ideology. Because what we've got keto, we've got low carb. Cool. There's some people who own that. So, what can we do now? Let's go carnivore. Okay, cool. So carnivore is more extreme. No plants, no fiber, no fruit, nothing. Carnivore. All right. And then there's a couple of, doctors who branded around that and own that. Well, okay, how can we get more extreme than that? Cool. Let's just eat organ meat only and like suntan our buttholes and, all this and shower once a week. Like if there's ever, if you've ever been able to smell a social media post, just go watch Liver King. Okay. You can smell them through the internet. And I know I know that's an ad hominem. It's not very nice, but come on. The guy's a known charlatan.
It's pretty funny.
And I reserve the nastiness for what I would call verifiable charlatans. He's a verifiable charlatan. And we now know, oh my God, shit, he was on tens of thousands of dollars of steroids a month after all, claiming natural. But then again, we have young, impressionable people who believe that's possible. Because, hey, I grew up thinking that pro wrestlers like Hulk Hogan, I grew up thinking they were natural. And, we never questioned that Mark McGuire and Barry Bonds and all these baseball players weren't juiced up. So I also have empathy for the people who, believe these things, right? So I don't think it helps when we in the know go, oh, how stupid could you possibly be believing this stuff? Guess what? You remember a time when you believed in Santa Claus, right? Come on, right? Or that Hulk Hogan wasn't a steroid user. You weren't thinking about this as a kid. And quite frankly, bring back this might piss some people off. Bring back the juiced up days of wrestling and baseball because I think they were better anyway. They were more fun. But that's a side note.
Yeah.
Well, I think it comes down to the lens in which you consume social media. And I think that that's really, really important. And so you have people like Goob who are saying hey, not everything you see on social media is real. There's someone I don't know. I don't remember how I stumbled across her YouTube, but her handle is Hannah Alonso, I believe is her name. And her big thing was MLMs. Kind of just debunking all this stuff. And it's fun to just have on in the background. If you're not a true crimes person, it's that's something that you kind of listen to. But she started doing an influencer series and it's fascinating, especially from the side of we create content. So it's very interesting to see other things, but she brought up all these different terms that I had seen, but again, because I feel like social media is so ever evolving and it rage baiting. Exactly what you were talking about earlier.
Rage baiting. Yep.
Rage baiting, where it's you create content knowing that it is going to piss people off, but they are going to comment because no one they have to comment their opinion and let you know how they feel. But people take that and run with it. And that is the foundation of their social media platform. And so it's exactly kind of what you're saying. It's it's hard because people who are creating content like fitness, it's not sexy, right? It's hey, you're gonna have to work hard. You're gonna have to eat well and change your habits. That is really hard to sell versus someone who rage baits or someone who goes, it's not your fault. It's this, it's this, it's this, it's this. And they grow.
I've used the phrase, it's the same thing, enragement merchants. And if you recognize that if you see it through that lens, it helps you filter. Now, Goob, who I love, by the way, Goob is himself an enragement merchant, but Goob is a rare exception where I think because of what he's doing is so good. The people he's calling on, we're talking about sex predators. We're talking about, people who are doing a lot of harm, like the people who are like snatching in their waists or whatever the hell they're doing. And someone might say, oh, what's so bad about that? Well, think about the collective damage that does to the emotional well-being, the body image issues it's creating for not just women, but people in general. So I like what Goob does, and I think he's one of the good ones. But I just have tried to approach my social media without the enragement, the call-out type behavior that we're seeing. But you're right, it gets clicks, it gets eyeballs, and just like news media, social media, the algorithms will push things that get engagement. People engage with fear, they engage with anger, they engage with outrage. And so one of the best things you could do for probably your cortisol level is to watch how much of the stuff you're consuming, because this shit's going to leave you in a constant state of being stressed out. So careful with that.
Yeah. Well, here's a question for you that I've been meaning to ask, and you kind of just brought it right back, which is perfect. I'm curious because, like you said, the algorithm prioritizes things that will get those clicks, it'll get the comments. And something you mentioned very, very early on in this episode was that you understand that there's a game to be played of like, how do I phrase something with like a little bit less nuance than I'd like because it will get people to actually read into the longer form stuff, right? And then buy into that. So where's that line for you? Like, how do you discern like the ethics behind that for when you're creating that short form to bring people into the long form?
I tend to be kind of extreme in the sense that it has to be ethical. Like, it has to meet my ethical standards. I will not engage in anything that I think is willfully misleading. I will not engage in anything that I think is, is pseudoscientific or anything along those lines. So, and I am willing to sacrifice some viral potential. In fact, I don't seek virality. I've sought growth and the ability to get in front of more people to help more people. But I've trusted in the fact that there are also people who show up to spaces to consume stuff that makes them feel good, not angry and outraged. And I continuously get messages from followers who appreciate the fact that I don't do that sort of stuff. Could I have had 1 million followers by now? Possibly. It's easy to say, oh, I don't want that. But I also have friends who I've talked to who have 1 million followers who they're like, they had to declare bankruptcy to their messaging. They can't respond to everything. I don't want to like reach that point anymore where I can't send a quick voice message to someone who asks me a question and just be grateful. I don't want to lose that. If it ever comes to a point where I find it hard to catch up with, I've got to be really savvy about, quote, monetizing it. So that way I can build my ability to earn livelihood. So I can actually take more time to engage with social media. Sounds awful. But I enjoy it. I actually do.
Yeah.
There's a balance. And I'm earning livelihood, helping people with scalable things. So that way I don't have to coach as much one-on-one, but I still love coaching one-on-one. So I still have a delicate balance. I've still made it work. But to answer your question, I don't even think I flirt with the line, right? It's not that, all right, I ask myself, where's the line? I don't go anywhere near it. I don't dance around the line. I'm not willing to play those games. I just play with words and I try to create things that I think, okay, I think this is going to be resonant. I think this is going to be helpful. This is authentic to me. This is how I think about the world. This is the stuff that I think will positively impact other people. And I know that when people are offended by my stuff, I know they're nuts because it's very hard to get offended by the shit that I post. I know that they're looking for a fight if they're actually like mad about the kids in gyms one. There's always some people coming, no, don't bring kids in gyms. They're going to be running around, blah, blah, blah. Like, just there's always people get mad about that. I'm just like, oh, you guys make this so easy. Stop being so fucking selfish, right? I'm not worried about kids taking over an Equinox or a Planet Fitness. It's not going to happen. Okay.
Yeah. I guess throwing in the word ethics, I think maybe skewed the question because that was more what I meant. What you just said about how do I get my message to like really resonate versus necessarily playing with the ethics of it. I think just it's what it sounds like is you're playing with the words to figure out like how do I make this as simple as possible so that it lands.
Yeah.
And then you can really read into the caption or the details or stuff.
And that's just it. I'm looking for resonance, not polarization. Okay. I don't look for polarization. I look for resonance. And that usually keeps me in very safe territory when it comes to stuff. There's always going to be somebody like I've had nutcases who've been offended by my shit. I'm just like, oh, look at you. You're a status seeking grifter who, operates in an ideological corner of our industry. I'm not playing your games. And I've literally had to tell people I am not going to participate in an argument about something I neither said nor implied. That's a quote that one person came in and look at that person's content. I'm like, oh, ideological extremism. Of course. I'm not surprised by this at all. I'm sick of that shit being everywhere else and I want to be free from it. So guess what? I don't perpetuate it. You guys have been wonderful. I appreciate this. So I know I'm out of time, so I'm going to say this to everybody. I run a podcast, so I know what this is like. It's something we don't do for money. It's our time, but it's also like really rewarding to get to have these conversations. It's really cool to share them. If you're the person who listens to the end of a podcast like this, I know you're in. I know you love it. And I know you support Christina and Marissa. So think about the person in your life who would find this valuable. So remember what I said about social currency. You have something, whether it's this specific episode or this podcast, you have something that you get a lot of value out of. Who in your world could you literally send this in a DM and say, hey, this made me think of you. I think you'd really like what the girls are doing. And I think you would get a ton of benefit out of this. I'm going to share this with you. If you do that, you actually do a lot to help you guys who are showing up all the time doing this. Like I said, there's no paycheck in it. I mean, it sure helps a greater business. This is fun. But this is a way we give and support. So please do that for them. I really appreciate you guys having me on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. That's really sweet.
Yeah, I was gonna say you can end all of our podcast episodes.
But I always look at this as like, honestly, it's me and Christine. It's time to catch up every week because we run separate businesses. So like, it's really just, yeah, let's talk about what's going on. And we love everyone that's been listening to all now 185 episodes or so.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That isn't easy. Like most people quit by 10. So that's incredible.
Yeah.
Kept it going. Well, where can the people find you, Andrew?
All roads go through Instagram at Andrew Coates Fitness, Coates. If you message me there, I will see it. I'll dig through the hidden ones. I will send you probably be a voice or maybe even a video message, depending on where I am. And I'll answer your questions if you have questions on writing or anything else, or if you're completely outraged and offended by what I said because you like to really dip into ideological stuff. I'm probably not going to dance on that one, but I appreciate you guys taking the time to listen. And I joke. I mean, I God, like the fact that like what I said is going to piss some people off is what's wrong with the world right now. But like I said, I will always answer your questions. And I would like to help and make your world better, not crazier, not more stressful. And thank you.
Love it.
Yeah. Well, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this episode. If you're not already subscribed, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. You can find Andrew on Instagram. We'll also have his information in the description below, but you can find Marissa and myself on Instagram. You can find me at Distilling Fit and Marissa is at Marissa Ray Fitness. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we hope to see you back next week.